Hello and welcome. We are live at the Guyana Space Centre for the launch of the next two satellites in Europe's satellite navigation system. It's called Galileo. And there they are inside the Soyuz launch vehicle on the pad, going through the final preparations for tonight's launch. We're scheduled to lift off in just over 16 minutes. You can see the countdown. There it is on the top right-hand side of your screen. And the status panels are green. That's a good sign. That means that we are go for launch. This is the mission control building. We are about 20 kilometres from the pad, and here the operational teams in what we call the fishbowl, the glass area, are all focusing very hard at this point before launch. So let's take a little look at our Soyuz vehicle herself. She's a strong and reliable workhorse. She's made of 4 sections, and we call those stages. The first section are the 4 boosters. Each one of those has its own engine. They burn for about 2 minutes, and they are attached to the central core stage, or the second stage. There it is. A mass at liftoff of just under 100 tons. The third stage there, nearly 28 tons. And then the fourth stage is the frigate upper stage. That's housing our passengers. Our 2 satellites are inside there as we speak. And there is the fairing protecting them, and if we were to cut it open, that's what we would see. It is indeed made of 2 halves. There they are, the 2 satellites, Galileo FOC M2 satellites, 7 and 8, manufactured by the prime contractor OHB. They're going to be in a medium Earth orbit, circular orbit. Number of different teams working here in mission control. This is one of them. This is the Flight Directorate, headed up by Stefan Israel. These are the Ariane Space top management. They take all the final decisions in the case of unplanned situations, and we have joint Russian and European teams working side by side here, and teams across the base report to them directly in real time. Galileo is very much a flagship program for Europe. We're launching 30 satellites, and Ariane Space is launching all of those. We've launched the first 6, now we're launching the 7th and 8th. So we're 4 minutes and 18 seconds to launch. We're going to have various phases during our flight. Let's take a look at those.
Hi everybody, I'm here just to present you the main events of this launch VS-11. 2 minutes after the liftoff, the jettisoning of the booster will take place, and then after 4 minutes there will be the fairing jettisoning, and just 1 minute after this fairing jettisoning there will be the cutoff of the block A and the ignition of the motor of the block I. During 4 minutes, the block I will follow the course of injections in order to inject the frigate MT, which is the upper stage. Then the frigate MT will do its first boost during 30 minutes. And then there will be a very long cut phase of around 3 hours. And after that, the second boost will occur during only 4 minutes in order to circularize the orbit. And then the separation of the 2 Galileo spacecraft will take place.
Well, that's all to come, but right now we're just under 2 minutes to launch, and there's Soyuz on the pad. Can you see the big grey mast over there on the left-hand side? That's feeding what we call the umbilical lines, or the feed lines, taking information from the satellites to your teams on the ground, Sylvain.
Yes, you're right. The feed lines are being disconnected right now.
There we go. He's just announced that disconnection.
So now it means that we no longer get information from our spacecraft. And we can't see the lines anyway because they're inside the mast.
Then the big grey mast. He's announcing
Top, à 0-1 minute.
He's announcing 1 minute to launch. We are orbiting the 7th and 8th satellites in Europe's Galileo satellite navigation system for the European Union and the European Space Agency.
Yes, so best wishes to all the teams for this launch, all of our colleagues.
And to everybody, of course, at the
Largage du
ground
Macazedem.
stations. Let's sit and watch.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le début de la séquence d'allumage lanceur. Top, à 0-20 secondes. Largage du MAVKM. Allumage triétage. À tous de DDO. Attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Top. Et décollage. Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
Wow, always impressive. There she goes, hauling herself against the gravity of our planet, which of course is pulling us back down, making life possible here on Earth, but making it very difficult to leave. We're burning 5 engines, one on the main core stage, one on
Les
each of
attitudes du
those.
lanceur suivant les 3 axes sont nominales. Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
One on each of those boosters. He's telling us that everything's going according to plan. Sylvain, your next 2 satellites have taken off.
Yes, you're right. Now we are very pleased that we are off the ground, for sure. We still have a long journey ahead of us, nearly 4 hours, but it seems to be a very good start. Yeah.
Take a look at the bottom of the screen. You can see on the left the altitude. We're 16 kilometers above the
Les
Earth,
paramètres de structure du lanceur sont nominaux.
and our cameras have picked up more images there of Soyuz as it hurtles across the sky. If we're lucky, we might even see the boosters falling away in about half a minute. At the bottom of the screen is the distance from the pad.
Les paramètres propulsifs sont conformes à l'attendu.
That's the distance if you were to draw a line along the Earth, and on the right-hand side, the speed. We can hear the launcher as it flies over, the delayed sound there. And this is the scheduled moment for the boosters to fall away. We don't need them anymore. They have done their job. They have burnt their propellant. And we can see superb images here from a previous
Séparation des
launch.
propulseurs, les blocs B, V, G, D.
And we have confirmation that the separation of the boosters has indeed occurred. So we're burning the main core stage now. Folk here call it the Block A, Sylvain.
Yes, you're right. It burns for just under 5 minutes. So it burns liquid oxygen and kerosene.
Little word about confirmations. You might have noticed that we get schedule events
Stabilisation correcte suite à la séparation des blocs.
and then slightly later we get the confirmation. That's because we are seeing key moments happening at the right time. But we get the confirmations of those milestones just fractionally later. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah, you're right, because it takes a little time for information to get from the launcher to the range operations manager here in the Guyana Space Center. So that's because it goes via
Le roulement du
Moscow.
vol est nominal.
He calls out the confirmations once he gets them. And so what we are seeing are the milestones when they are scheduled to happen.
There at the front of the vehicle is the fairing. We saw it earlier. It's housing the satellites. They're inside there. It's got several jobs. Most notably, it's protecting the satellites from the rigors of the launch.
Yeah. So we are having, for instance, acoustic vibrations at liftoff, so very loud, friction. So the launcher is flying through the dense part of the atmosphere at very high speed. So it's very hot outside the fairing.
And that friction is dissipating now because if you look at the bottom of the screen, we're 114 kilometers above the Earth and we don't need the fairing anymore. So
Séparation des deux demi-coiffes.
it's just fallen away. We've had confirmation and we can now see your two babies.
Yes, yeah, we see them quite well. So we see the golden part there is a frégate, and then on
L'attitude
top,
du lanceur suivant ces trois axes sont nominales.
you see our two satellites with the dispenser in the middle to hold them.
If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can still see it there.
Yes, correct. Then you see now we start to see the panel that will face Earth when it is in orbit. So you see the antennas.
Which
Here.
ones are the
La propulsion
antennas?
du bloc A est nominale.
The round part. The round part there is the navigation antenna, the one which will broadcast navigation signals. And then as it turns, you see now the solar panels, the rectangular part.
And they're the two grey rectangles facing us. They're going to deploy once we separate the satellites and inject them onto their orbit. You get a better picture of them there.
Yes, you see them now again.
And they'll unfold like a butterfly coming
Les
out of
paramètres à bord sont normaux.
its cocoon. So we are now getting the separation of the second stage. We lit or ignited our third
Allumage
stage
bloc I,
engine.
extinction bloc A et séparation.
And we have confirmation of that we have ignited the third stage engine, which
Largage de la section arrière.
we do before we get rid of the second stage engine. That's a peculiarity of Soyuz. Here we go. Let's
Stabilisation correcte suite à la séparation.
take another look at that launch earlier this evening. That was 5.5 minutes ago nearly. Pretty impressive. Never get tired of seeing that.
Les paramètres propulsifs du bloc I sont nominaux.
There are various different bodies involved in the governance of the Galileo program, Sylvain. There's
Yes, you're right. So ESA is the architect of the system. So we design and develop the system, and we are in charge of making it work. The GSA is the entity in charge of providing the services, and of course the European Commission is the program manager.
just to explain to anyone who hasn't seen a launch before, top right-hand side of the screen is what we call the trajectory. The white
Les
dot.
attitudes du lanceur sont conformes à l'attendu. Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
The white dot on that curve is the actual position of the launch vehicle. The curve itself is the planned trajectory of the vehicle. At the bottom you can see we're coming up nearly heading towards 5 kilometers a second. This is a hugely important flagship project for all Europeans. So some important strategies there from the EU, and the European Commission has taken over the role of funding Galileo. Our flight path takes us out. We're heading out across the Atlantic right now from the northeastern tip of South America, which is where we took off from.
La stabilisation du lanceur est conforme à l'attendu.
And we'll be heading out across Europe. We'll head out across Russia, down across China, Southeast Asia, heading south towards Australia, and that's where we'll be separating our satellites. And we are tracking the vehicle using ground stations
Yes,
as
you're
she
right.
flies over.
Yeah. Many of them. So we will have a boat in the middle of the Atlantic after the first one. Then we will have a station in Azores, Santa Maria. Then in Osaguel, Toulouse. And then we will lose visibility for some minutes. And we will arrive near Australia. Perth Station will take it at that moment.
Propulsion nominale du bloc I. Et décollage.
So what we've been talking about here is telemetry. The launcher is sending signals to the ground stations. And we've had the signal at the station in Perth. Here we have separation now of the third stage. It's burnt its fuel. We don't need it anymore. 9.5 minutes into the flight.
Extinction et séparation du bloc I.
And we're now starting the next phase of the journey. Frigate, the upper stage, is taking the wheel. You can see there the third stage moving away. And Frigate is that gold structure. It's got 6 spherical tanks, and they're organised in a circle.
Yeah, 4 for propellants and 2 of them for avionics, a bit like we have in a cockpit of an aircraft. So for flight control systems, navigation, communication, and so on. And the satellites are attached using a special dispenser on top of it.
Frigate's getting ready to switch on its engine. It's in what we call the pre-burn phase. It's giving a quick burst of acceleration to push the fluids back in the tanks, and that's to make sure that there's enough propellant to ignite the engine properly. It's a little bit like when you're in a car and you put your foot on the accelerator. So here is the scheduled first ignition of the frigate upper stage for its first burn. It's going to burn for just over 13 minutes, and frigate's job is a very important one because frigates really has, as we said earlier, taken the wheel now. It's going to deliver our satellites to their drop-off point in space, and it's going to take it another 3 hours and 38 minutes to get there. We're going to have two main propulsion phases during that time, aren't we?
Yes, you're right. So the first burn takes us to what we call the
pré-allumage de l'étage frégate.
To what we call the transfer orbit. Yes, we wait for that, yeah. And then we will switch off the engine, and we'll coast for about 3 hours and 15 minutes. And then we will have the second burn. So this one will take us to what we call the separation orbit, where we will relieve our satellites. So it should be on a circular orbit.
The Galileo constellation is being built and launched bit by bit.
In Kourou, elements of the next Soyuz launch are being assembled. Galileo satellites 7 and 8 will soon be sent on orbit. The Galileo program is solidly back on track for its deployment phase. At the end of 2013, Galileo successfully completed its in-orbit validation phase, when ESA tested the system extensively using a mini-constellation of 4 satellites. The first fixed position based on Galileo signals only was a historical moment. And the results of the test campaign on roads, at sea or in the air showed that the system design was good and sound, opening the door for the deployment of the rest of the constellation. Last August, the launch of the first full operational capacity satellites suffered from an injection anomaly, the 2 satellites being sent on an elliptic orbit instead of the circular one. Hopefully, after intensive work, both satellites have been recovered. They're now on a quasi-circular orbit where they are tested to confirm that they're working perfectly. Analysis is ongoing on their future use in the overall Galileo system. That allowed a green light for continuation, in particular the launching of satellites 7 and 8 here under preparation in Kourou. During this deployment phase, Europe will be procuring another 22 satellites. Of course, as the constellation is completed, Galileo's overall performance improves in terms of accuracy and availability. Therefore, Galileo's early services could start based on 12 satellites. When fully deployed, the Galileo system will be made up of a 30-satellite constellation associated to a major ground segment. The provision of improved navigation services relies also on the deployment of ground stations. The Galileo system is controlled in space from 2 centers, one in Oberpfaffenhofen, Germany, which mainly manages the satellites, and one in Fucino, Italy, where the navigation message is generated and uplinked to the satellites via a network of remote stations distributed worldwide. The satellites then broadcast the navigation signals, including the latest message prepared by the ground segment. During this deployment phase, both centers are being upgraded so they can act as backup for each other. With the successful in-orbit validation phase and the ongoing deployment phase, and now the 2 Galileo satellites launched last summer showing they work properly, Europe's Galileo program is well on its way. ESA and the European Union are taking another step forward in completing the Galileo constellation and offering navigation services to the users.
So, Arianespace and the Russian partners worked hard to resolve the issues from the launcher side, and you and your teams performed a very impressive rescue operation to recover the satellites.
I think you're right. Yes, sometimes we learn more from anomalies than we do from normal behaviors. Yeah. So the teams are a bit like pilots. You know, they are flying the satellites from the ground, and it's a very skilled job, really. And of course, we are very proud of them.
La propulsion de l'étage frégate est conforme à l'attendu.
So we are still on good parameters. So what they did, in fact, for that, they put the satellites into a safe configuration, and this was really an emergency. It had to be done very quickly, in a couple of hours. And then they found a way to raise the orbits with little fuel.
Let's see the details now of what actually happened to Galileo's 5 and 6.
Kourou, 21st of August 2014. At first, the Soyuz mission seems to go well. However, data analysis then shows that its 2 passengers are on a wrong orbit. Since then, the causes have been understood and Soyuz is back on duty. But for the Galileo satellites sent on an elliptic orbit instead of a circular one, solutions had to be found. The first tasks were in Darmstadt by the joint ESOC-CNES team in charge of the usual post-launch activities. The work turned into a rescue operation with crucial decisions to be taken right away.
So they managed to recover the orbit in a few hours and within the visibility of the tracking stations, because I mean, when you go to the next tracking station, you lose basically satellite. You have to know what is the visibility from the next tracking station. And this you do only if you have an orbit reconstructed.
Once the satellites were secured, they could be transferred to the supervision of the Galileo Control Center in Oberpfaffenhofen near Munich. Then the best maneuver strategy had to be chosen and the recovery scenarios defined.
We developed together a maneuver strategy and then we execute them. A number of maneuvers were performed. We are talking about 14 maneuvers per satellite.
Securing the birds in space was one thing, but at the same time, the ground segment overseeing all Galileo systems needed to be able to work with them. So it had to be sure that the operations in space were in line with the capabilities of the system on the ground.
And the good news is that we've now recovered the satellites. So we've taken it to what was even a scenario which was well outside of its operational parameters, and now we've moved it into a place where they can be used and can be salvaged. So from that respect, we've saved the mission.
With all these maneuvers and reprogramming, the satellites are now operable on a corrected target orbit. This is already a great achievement because it is the first time that their type of OHB-built satellites are in space. So it's essential to be able to test them for real. Now, since they work well, it might be possible to fulfill the actual goal of this launch, the navigation mission.
We've done a number of studies at the beginning to see what would have been possible to reprofile this mission. It was our intention from the very beginning to recover the mission. So now we are in the process of discussion together with the European Commission what can be the operational usage of these satellites. At ESA, we are convinced that the satellites can be used.
Different tests in ESA labs and at manufacturers have checked the capabilities of the satellites. Even if they are on a different orbit, they could now contribute to the overall Galileo constellation.
I think we've learned a lot more about the spacecraft design for the FOC spacecraft, how it behaves in real life, in ways that wouldn't normally have been apparent if everything had gone perfectly smoothly.
The 2 Galileo satellites we feared lost should be able to work jointly with their space companions, and the building of the European navigation system can now continue.
Well, all credit to OHB, the prime contractor, and all the industrial teams who've quite clearly proven that they've built satellites that are robust and work.
Oh, well, you're right, yes. And also, I must say that Arianespace and the Russian teams did also an excellent job to identify and deal with the malfunction on Fregat. So they have restored full confidence in this upper stage. And they've gone even further because they've used the experience to make some excellent improvements in their procedures also. So I think we've all learned a lot out of it.
Absolutely, and navigation is becoming such an integral part of our lives. Who'd have thought not very long ago nobody had navigation on their phones, and now actually everyone does. Let's turn our attention to this superb upper stage here, frigate. It was originally designed by the Russians as an interplanetary probe, and it was then adapted to fly on Soyuz.
Yes, you are correct, because it can switch its engine on and off up to 20 times. So it could take its passengers virtually anywhere they need to go. So that makes Soyuz ideal for launching constellations. And today we got 2 main boosts.
And it's an important flight for Soyuz because it's its 50th launch today. It was first launched on 2000 from Baikonur. That's when it was first adapted to fly on Soyuz. They had 2 qualifying flights that year, and then in the July it launched a cluster for the European Space Agency. Now, some folk here may well remember those 4 satellites. They were bouncing around the magnetic field and telling us all about our magnetosphere, and they went off on two Soyuz flights in the July and August, and I remember because I was hosting the TV show, so that was memorable. Now, we've crossed the Atlantic and we headed out over Northern Europe and Russia. We're now, I believe, flying, I think maybe over China, heading down towards Southeast Asia and Australia.
Yes. When we get close to Australia, we'll check in and with a tracking station in Perth.
And it's going to take us about 3 hours to get there.
Yeah.
We're taking a look here at a replay of our launch earlier on this evening. So we're going to take a break in our programme, and we're going to be coming back to you shortly before we release our satellites. We had a perfect liftoff earlier, and the first 3 stages flew perfectly. Here we go. We can see it again. This was 31 minutes, nearly 32 minutes ago. We're going to come back to you at 22:30 hours Kourou time. That's 1:30 UTC, Universal Time.
2:30 in France.
Okay, for you French folk there and other
Yeah,
Europeans
Toulouse,
watching us, people in Toulouse. So rendezvous back here at 1:30 European time, or Universal Time, I should say. We'll see you then. Welcome back. We are orbiting Europe's 7th and 8th satellites in the Galileo navigation constellation, and we are 3 hours and 45 minutes into the flight, and we'll shortly be releasing our satellites onto their orbit. I'm Katie Haswell, and joining me in the commentary box is Sylvain Lodo. Sylvain is the ground segment manager at the European Space Agency. Thanks for joining us again, Sylvain.
Good evening. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
So the satellites lifted off from the pad at 9:46 Universal Time on board the Russian launcher Soyuz.
Confirmation du 2e allumage de l'étage frégate.
It was a textbook launch, indeed the 1,840th launch for Soyuz, and the 11th flight from its home here at the Guyana Space Center. Everything went like clockwork as Soyuz blasted off into the evening sky here on the equator. The boosters fell away just after 2 minutes. And we lost the
Confirmation de
fairing
l'extinction de l'étage frégate.
for a coast phase during that time. And it's now switched its engine back on and has circularized its orbit. So we're in view of the tracking station in Perth. We're off the southwest coast of Australia.
Australia now, yes.
Which other stations are following the satellites, Sylvain?
Now from the LOCC in Toulouse, they will be using 3 stations Arthur-Bischuk in South Africa. You have one other in Kerguelen, so north of Atlantica, and the third one in Dongara.
And Kerguelen is also known as the Desolation Islands.
Well, that's true, yes. It's quite far away.
So we are now going through what we call some people like to say the space ballet or the orientation phase. Frigate is getting ready to release the satellites, and it goes through a very precise and carefully planned set of maneuvers because we need to orientate the satellites correctly in order to set them on the right path. Tell us more about this injection attitude.
Yes, in fact, Frigate will drop the satellites at an altitude of 23,500 kilometers. This is a little higher than the final orbit, which is about 300 kilometers below that. And in fact, we've injected the satellites in what is the graveyard orbit for the Galileo satellites. So in case something goes wrong, so I hope not, of course, right now at least they will not pollute the nominal orbit.
And then you can drop them down into their correct position,
yes.
According to plan. So we're waiting now for the separation. And just to remind everybody, we do have a delay in getting our confirmations. It's perfectly normal. We see the key moments happening at the right time. And we get the actual confirmations of those milestones just slightly later. And that's because it takes just a little bit of time for the information to get to the range operations manager here at the Guyana Space Center. There he is, Joël Egalgi, this evening.
Confirmation de la séparation des deux Galileo Foc M2, Sat 7 et Sat 8.
And he's just announced separation of the two satellites. Separated together simultaneously, we can see them moving away there with these computer-generated images showing us what's happening in space. So that's good news.
Very good news. This is now a critical moment for us.
What's happening? Who's monitoring this?
So now, well, in fact, the satellites are waking up by themselves in reality. So they will transmit a telemetry signal to the Earth. And once we've received that, well, we will know that they are healthy. And this is done by the LOCC in Toulouse. And then the satellites will go into an automatic sequence of activities. So they will point toward the sun, and they will try to recharge their batteries and deploying their solar arrays. In fact, this is one of the first things they do. And this is very important because, of course, satellites need energy to carry out their mission. And there is a nice expression for that we call the breathing point.
The breathing point?
Yeah.
We're going to hear now from the CEO of Arianespace, Stéphane Israël. So we're going to hear from him.
So, ladies and gentlemen, at the moment where I speak to you and I speak to you, we can confirm that the satellites have been separated and that we have acquired the signal. As you know, we want to take time to pronounce the final success of the mission. So what we had scheduled is 1 hour and 30 minutes. So we will take this time, maybe less, maybe more, we will see. But the first information I can tell you is that things are normal and are going in the right direction. So let's wait a little bit for cross-check information to make a final verdict on this mission, but things are seems to go in the right direction.
So just to recap, we are waiting for confirmation of the success of the whole mission, and we'll be coming back to you again in about an hour and 10 minutes. I'll just run through those times again. 1 minute past 3. And you can see it on the bottom of the screen there. Stand by for confirmation of mission success. Welcome back to our live broadcast. We're orbiting Europe's 7th and 8th satellites in the Galileo navigation constellation. The satellites have been separated. We've had confirmation of that, and we're now getting confirmation and looking for confirmation of the success of the whole mission.
Yeah.
Standing by now for Stefan Israel, the chairman and CEO of Arianespace, to come and talk to us, but judging by the applause, everything appears to be going well.
Yeah, it seems so. You're right, yes.
Stefan Lodo is joining me here in the commentary box. Stefan is in charge of ground segment at ESA. And the tracking stations, the guys and girls at the tracking stations are following us here right now, Stefan.
Yes.
Over now to Stefan Israel, Chairman and CEO of Arianespace.
Bien, mesdames et messieurs, vu l'heure tardive, vous me permettrez de m'exprimer en français.
Gentlemen, given this late hour, you will allow me to speak French. I'm delighted to announce that according to our onboard telemetry system, Adam and Anastasia have been safely separated on their targeted medium Earth orbit. It's a full success. It's a full success for Galileo tonight. So tonight it's very important for Arianespace because our raison d'être is to guarantee European governments and institutions independent, reliable and available access to space. And tonight we've carried out our mission. So it's a moment of great emotion because it's the resuming of launches for the Galileo mission. And on behalf of Arianespace, I want to thank many people tonight. I want to thank the members of the Independent Investigation Commission, starting with Peter Dubok, who is with us tonight, and he played a key role chairing this commission and leading it to the appropriate conclusions. Along with Peter, many people played a very important role, and I'd like to say a few words about our Chief Technical Officer, Edouard Perez. Edouard is a very discreet person. He's not looking for fame, but for the success of missions, and the success of this mission tonight owes a lot to the work carried out by Edouard, to his methodology and his demanding nature, because in our profession we have to be very demanding. I want to thank our Russian partners, NPO Levochkin and Roscosmos. It was a very important day for them because they also had a successful launch to the International Space Station with 3 astronauts, which is a proof that space brings down all frontiers. So congratulations to our colleagues from Roscosmos. So of course, last but not least, I am particularly grateful to the European Commission and to the European Space Agency, our clients for this mission. Of course, this return to flight is something that we built with the navigation program of ESA with Didier Favre and Jean-Jacques Dordain. And this is something that we built with the European Commission in a transparent and trusting dialogue with the Commission. So I want to thank Daniel Calleja Crespo with us tonight, And I want to thank Commissioner Bieńkowska because, as she said in Brussels at the end of January, there is no launch without a risk. Any launch is a risk, but the biggest risk is to stay on the ground. So she took a risk, a measured risk, obviously, and tonight she realizes this was a good choice. So it's the resuming of Galileo's deployment tonight. There are many missions in the book. We have to launch 3 Soyuz and 6 Ariane launches. And for Ariane Space, this will be an absolute priority. We want to continue deploying successfully this constellation. It is also very good news because, as we mentioned this morning, there was a huge work carried out by teams from ESOC and CNES to place back into a useful orbit the satellites that were launched on August the 22nd. And tonight we know that thanks to the work of ESOC and CNES engineers, these 2 satellites will contribute to the Galileo program. So that's the second good news today. I also want to pay tribute to OHB, our partner. Every 3 months, they provide us with 2 satellites. That's an outstanding success. So we'll continue deploying this constellation with OHB. So bravo, congratulations to all engineers in Bremen. I'd like to finish with these few words. Ariane Space celebrated its 35th anniversary yesterday because it was set up after Ariane 1 flew on the 1st of December, and we were set up on the 26th of March 1980. So it's a beautiful celebration with this return in flight of Galileo, but we have many challenges ahead of us. One challenge is 2020 with Ariane 6 that we are looking forward to having because this will be an outstanding launcher, and we played an active role in the decision that was made for this new launcher. And this will be also the launch of a new governance. We are ready for that challenge because this will be the governance of success. Now, one word for someone who is with us tonight, Michel Aimant. Michel, this is your last launch as Director for Launches at CNES. He has new adventures awaiting for him. He worked with CNES in the 1990s and has been a key partner for Ariane Space for all the developments in the Ariane program. So thank you to all the teams. Thank you to the teams in the Soyuz program for Ariane Space. Thank you to all our partners at CNES CSG, with whom launch after launch we capitalize on success. And we've seen tonight that we share information together. Thank you to CNES and CSG. Thank you to all ground engineers supporting us. With this second launch, we're on track to have a beautiful year. We expect a minimum of 11 launches. So it was a beautiful beginning of the year, and we'll continue on the same tracks. Thank you very much indeed.
So some very happy faces there. It's mission accomplished once again for Ariane Space and for the teams at ESA. Galileo's FOC 7 and 8 are on orbit. They are healthy. They're starting their new lives in the skies. And huge congratulations to all the teams who've contributed to today's success. I think everybody deserves a very, very big pat on the back.
I think you're right, yes. Very well done.
Sylvain, and also very many thanks to you for joining me here in the commentary box. It's been a real privilege to have you here.
Yes, it was a pleasure for me as well. So I would like also to wish the teams on the ground all the best as they progress now with the job and up to the commissioning of the satellites and what comes after.
Absolutely. There's A lot of guys and girls there who've got their work cut out now over the coming weeks. So it's goodbye from me, Katie Haswell.
And also from me, Sylvain Lodo. Goodbye.
Goodbye.